Hey folks, I know you came here for the review of the episode, but before I begin with the review, I want to draw some attention to something important. I recently chatted with Event Horizon, and he's in a situation where he's homeless and he had to make a GoFundMe hoping to raise funds for his situation. It went up about a week ago, and it hasn't gotten a lot of support, so I told him that I could tag the GoFundMe in my next review, so here we are. I would have made a separate video addressing the issue, but those don't get enough views compared to my reviews. So I thought that the GoFundMe could get more exposure if I put it at the beginning of this video. I just want to make sure that he gets the support he needs, so I highly encourage that before you see the review, please check out the GoFundMe and spread it around in any way that you can. If you can donate to it yourself, that would be great, but if you can't, please spread awareness for this GoFundMe. If everyone who clicks on this video donates at least $1, Event Horizon should be able to meet his quota and will be able to find a decent place and can hopefully get back on his feet from there. Thank you for listening, and if you already did all that stuff I told you to do, sit back, relax, and enjoy the review. Really? You had to make a gag about how horses like being rewarded with carrots? That's racist, man. So we got an episode with Starburst shipping fuel as it takes us back to their hometown where they parted ways. It is a nice idea for them to return home and react to all the changes since childhood, but the episode instead focuses on them solving a friendship problem relating to their parents. More specifically, Starlight's dad and Sunburst's mom. And does it work? Well, I think it's a little half and half. There's certainly things that work, at the expense of the episode being really cringy half the time. I should start with the chemistry that Star and Sun share in this episode, and it's actually not bad. In the time since she's become a supporting character, Starlight has been much more outgoing, and later episodes have made an effort to do stuff with her so her presence doesn't feel so empty in these later seasons. The progression of her character has been shown to be quite interesting as she really works on moving forward, using knowledge from her past mistakes to help others and encourage them, instead of simply saying, "I did some mean things in the past, but now I'm a good guy." On the other hand, Sunburst, whose role is less prominent, has remained reasonably consistent along with his character. We see how his burial in studies and pursuit of knowledge has reasonably left him lacking in social skills, but he still retains an adorable personality that's relatable. And despite his lacking social skills, he still knows how to properly interact with others, allowing him to maintain a multi-layered characterization. And because of the situation this episode puts them in, they're allowed to work off each other in a way that both gives them good chemistry and fits into the story. Both of them are able to relate to the hardship of having overbearing parents, and they do a good job expressing their frustrations and why they would feel distant from them. And we see that it's actually very understandable as to why they'd be distant from them. An interesting thing about it is that the parents have the same problem but have different ways of demonstrating it. Starlight's dad, named Firefly, is overwhelmingly supportive like Dash's parents to the point where it's absolutely uncomfortable. Sunburst's mom, named Stellar Flare, seems to have a lot, and I mean a lot, of expectations from her son, constantly telling him that he needs to have a life plan and pushing him to be successful and accomplishing. And it also seems to reflect on their conflicting ideals of running the town. Stellar Flare wants to be more progressive, while Firelight wants to stay traditional. To the episode's credit, it does get the conflicting rivalry out of the way fairly early on, and they proceed to work together to find better solutions for the town, allowing the episode to expand on the possibilities of its premise. In fact, it's actually a good strength on the episode's behalf. The pacing, the theme of the story, and the setup all come together full circle, which helps the episode to progress properly. We see in the beginning how Starburst piles up his letters from his mom, establishing their distancing from their respective parents. They end up being called to the town where they know their parents would be waiting for them and find out they have to solve a problem relating to them. They think it's about making them friends at first, but then it turns out that it's another issue entirely. Then they find out that the problem is actually about them reconnecting with their parents. And this is what I like about the episode the most. It takes its concept even further instead of going with the obvious formula, twisting it into something else and furthering what ideas they could do with the episode. It would have been really easy to just say we have to make these two friends and we're done, but the episode expands on itself by furthering the dilemma, giving the two a chance to reconnect with their families. On top of that, this episode is parental guidance done much better. We of course get the cringy and overbearing parents, but the episode is done much more through the kids' perspective. Instead of adding a third character and splitting this perspective of the story through them like they did with Scootaloo, it's done specifically through the son and daughter. And you get to see more of them dealing with the situation and the different ways that it affects them. And the moment where they finally lose their patience with their parents and tell them what they're doing wrong is both more straightforward and a lot less ill-intentioned. They do it without being needlessly mean about it. It's not going too far, it's just them being brutally honest in an appropriate way. But it doesn't even end there. They end up coming to terms with how they need to better confront their parents on their own, instead of feeling guilt-tripped by a third party, again like they did with Dash and Scootaloo. And the best part of it is, instead of simply accepting their overbearing behavior, they actually tell them how they need to improve and stop being so pushy. And the parents actually acknowledge how they need to improve. So there's a change in attitude to how they approach their kids from now on. Everything about Starlight and Sunburst's perspective towards the situation is relatable. From their distant feelings towards their parents to the frustration and lack of patience, to seeking out a solution to the problem. I do have to admit that the ending does help give some reason to the perspective of the parents. Stellar Flare clearly wanted her son to succeed after he failed his studies, and Firelight was trying to make his daughter happy after she lost her childhood. In the Crystalling, it's implied that Sunburst was too afraid to admit that he wasn't a wizard and how ashamed of himself he felt, which would tie into him failing his studies. And Starlight was clearly broken up over losing her friend, which would make her antisocial considering the goth phase she went through. And I really like how it teaches us how our relationship with our parents can evolve over time. At first, our parents will treat us like kids and be parental, but as we grow older and more independent, they do become more like friends that we hang out with. Our parents come to acknowledge that we become grown adults and have to start communicating with us on a level that's equal to theirs. It sets the path for us to find new ways to bond and interact with each other. This is actually one of the more important morals the show has given us, and I like how it teaches this in a story where it fits and feels appropriate. There's some nice visual gags, some funny exchanges, even the townspeople who appear as gag characters end up being properly utilized into a supporting role as the episode goes on. But there's also a number of issues the episode has. The first and most obvious is how absolutely cringy the parents are most of the episode. I get that the point was for them to act like that so we see how it affects their kids, but it really doesn't make it any easier to sit through. They come across as very immature and act much more childish than their offspring, and the ways they cling to their kids get to very uncomfortable levels. Stellar Flare tries lying to her son into believing he's fulfilling his mission to the point of being deliberately deceitful, and Firelight's behavior just gets very, very creepy. And we have to sit through this for at least half of the episode. It just gets really old really fast, and it makes you ask whatever happened to Starlight's mom or Sunburst's dad. Could it be that them becoming single parents over time would explain their overbearing and clingy behavior? If so, there's no explanation for it. The missing parents are never brought into question throughout the entire episode, despite that we've seen Sunburst's dad on screen before. It really would have helped to get some hint as to what happened to their spouses to further explain their behavior, which ends up becoming a big missed opportunity. The side of Starlight's goth phase also has a lot of confusing implications. I guess she became goth after losing Sunburst, but how does it connect with the rest of what's been established about her character? It's something that was clearly done for the sake of a visual gag, but now we're expected to connect it with the rest of her background. When and how did she grow out of the phase? And what was her father doing during this phase? Was he really so naive that he never noticed his daughter's lifestyle or attitude change? Hell, why did he never notice that she went silent for all the time that she was leading a cult? With this goth room thing in mind, it's implied that she stayed in the Hollow after Sunburst left, and in that time she never tried contacting Sunburst or tried making more friends. Her father never tried helping her with either of those problems, because if he was ever concerned for Starlight, he certainly doesn't show that kind of attitude when she came back after all these years. He just continues to over-smother her. Did he at least encourage her to improve her studies of magic? This goth room adds so much confusion, which was most likely unintentional considering it's conveyed as a gag, and instead of being funny, it makes Starlight's past much more needlessly convoluted. We might have gotten an implication more interesting if they took the time to mention the missing parents, like Firelight trying to connect with his distancing daughter who pushes him away. Or at the very least if his behavior wasn't made out to be so uncomfortably creepy. There's also the running issue of the map losing its specialness. Maybe the map is sentient in some way if it's able to recognize Sun and Star's distant relationship with their parents, but the inconsistency still feels very present. The map was special in the earlier seasons because it felt exclusive to the main six. It made them like some kind of Knights of the Round Table of problem solvers, and it made sense because of their connection with the elements. Now it's just a random dialing machine that anyone can use, turning it into a plot device instead of a mystical artifact. And lastly, the Spike cameo was really annoying. His behavior in this episode is a heavy opposite from his role in the previous one, going from a straight man with a lack of patience for Twilight's absent-minded decisions, to this snooty, overconfident jock pushing his ego. I wouldn't mind so much except for the fact that he's acting like he accomplished something. That one friendship mission he was assigned, he totally sucked at it. It was a problem so incredibly easy to avoid that he just made needlessly complicated, and he wasn't even the one who solved the problem. I feel like for this small bit of screen time he was demoted to some lame comic relief, and it's a disservice to his character by emphasizing his less interesting traits. So the parent map is ultimately an episode that could have been a lot better and only manages to be okay. It had a lot of nice stuff going for it, but the cringy tone and questionable implications along with some lackluster writing decisions end up dragging it down. I suppose I would see it again sometime, but there's still some other episodes we got this season with much more revisiting value. Hopefully we'll get something better next time. So until next time, take care of yourselves and stay awesome. This is Map signing out.